And we're going to be continuing, winding down. I don't think we're going to get it finished this evening. The Mark of the Beast, Volume 1. And we left off on page 215, but I do want to rehearse a little bit about what was covered, what was covered last week concerning the coming of Yahshua Messiah. And we know that Yahshua's coming is dependent upon the energy that Satan puts forth. If we take a look here and remember just kind of what's written here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and it's concerning the day of Yahweh. And let me see here. It shows here in verse 1, it says, "But concerning the times and seasons, brothers, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of Yahweh so comes as a thief in the night." And this again is one of the so-called theories, or one of the so-called doctrines, I guess, if you would, that Christianity or that the churches have come up with would be he comes as a thief in the night, and they try to say, well, he's going to come secretly. Does a thief come in secret? No, a thief doesn't come in secret. When does a thief come into the house? When the householder is not expecting it, right? And this is how Yahshua's coming is going to come upon the earth, and that's actually what the prophecies show, is that the prophecies are going to come upon mankind. It's going to come upon the earth very unexpectedly, because they're too busy marrying, giving in marriage, eating, drinking, rising up to play. They have their minds filled with entertainment. They have their minds so set on committing and fulfilling the lusts of the flesh. This is where their mind is. They think everything's going to be the same today. It's going to be the same tomorrow as it was today, as it was yesterday. That nothing's going to change. And that's part of this strong delusion. That's part of this deception that's out in the world. All you got to do, man, is look out. Anybody can look out and look at the news and see how bad things are getting. The STDs, not just the STDs, but also the disease epidemics, the wars, the strife, the hatred that abounds. We're sheltered a lot from that here in Yahweh's house, because this is Yahweh's protected place, and Yahweh's protection comes upon His people because we're obedient to Him. That's how we abide under the shadow of this protection, is because we're obedient. But we see these things. That the day of Yahweh will come as a thief in the night, unexpectedly. For when they say peace, true peace, then sudden destruction comes upon them, and this is what we're waiting to see. This is part of the fulfillment of one of the prophecies. One of the markers that we are looking for is for the people to say peace, true peace. And then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. And it shows here, it says, look at the next verse down there. He says, "But you, brothers, are not in darkness, so that this day would not overtake you like a thief." Now remember what the darkness represents. Death, misery, destruction. Go back to Genesis chapter 1 and look in verse 2, and then go back into the side note there and see what that darkness represents. Misery, pain, all of those things. You are not in darkness, so that this day would not overtake you like a thief. You are the children of the light. Remember, we're obedient. We're being obedient to the laws of Yahweh. We are the children of the light. And the children of the day, we are not of the night nor of darkness. For those who sleep, notice there, therefore let us not sleep as the others do, but let us watch and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep in the night, and those who are drunk in the night. Yes, they sleep. They're oblivious to this in their confusion, in their darkness, in the confusion, and they are drunk. They're confused, which is what the breaking of the laws of Yahweh brings. It brings about confusion, and so you can see here that they're drunk. They're drunk in the night. But let us who are of the day be sober, and then it's putting on the breastplate of the faith and love, and the helmet and the hope of salvation. Go back to the full armor of Yahweh, and see what each of those represents. And then he goes on to show there in verse 9 that Yahweh has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our King Yahshua Messiah, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, that we would live together with him. And that's part of the prophecy concerning the resurrection, which is what we're dealing with in this particular area of the chapter now. So, and then we've already seen there that in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 9 there, it shows that the coming of Satan, that Satan's coming is who's coming, not who Satan's coming, that Satan's energy, how much energy that she puts forth against the believers, against the house of Yahweh, against the believers and those who would keep the law of Yahweh, that is going to dictate when Yahshua comes. There's how much energy is being expended. Because remember, Yahweh promises us that this house is not going to be allowed to be put into the grave. Okay, it's not going to be allowed to go back in the grave again, as it did. One of the other things that they talk about quite, that's quite prevalent is a secret rapture. That people are going to come, that the Messiah is going to come secretly and whisk away all of those who follow his, who have accepted him and believe him and taken him into their heart, and they're going to spare them from the tribulation. Well, that's not scriptural either. In fact, if you look, and we've talked about this once before, probably more times than that, but if you remember the parable of the wheat and the tares, look at who's gathered first. It's not the wheat that were pulled up first and gathered into the storehouse, but it was the tares that were gathered up first and cast into the fire. Okay, so they don't have any scriptural, basis for that secret rapture. I've even heard some who will go and read part of that scripture and say, you see here, there are two in the field, one taken and one left. That's the rapture. Yeah, but they don't read down the next couple of verses to see who was taken first. Okay, they err not knowing the scriptures. And then they have the theory that the Messiah has already come. And all of these don't have any basis in Scripture whatsoever. Many of these theories come from, almost all of them come from the ancient mystery religions. If you go back, when we were when we were studying, did Yahshua Messiah pre-exist? When we were studying that particular book, and Devil Worship: The Shocking Facts, that one also. You can see, remember the ancient mystery religions and the different things that they dreamed up, the philosophies. Philosophers were the smartest men that they knew. They were the smartest people that they knew, were the philosophers that came up with this stuff. And that's what they did all. They sat and they thought and they dreamed these things up into their minds. And, and this is, and they passed these on, they passed these things on to the people. And the things that they did, the things that these religions, these ancient religions, and even your modern day religions also continue this. Remember, they play on the emotions. They tug at the emotions. Well, just do what's right in your heart. Well, we're warned that the heart is desperately wicked. We have to be careful of that. They play on the emotions. The religions, they change to meet the needs of the people. Yahweh doesn't change to meet our needs. We're called to his house to change, to conform, to be made in the image and likeness of Yahweh, because Yahweh has a job for us to do. He's training us for a job. And we're going to get into that this evening. We're going to get into that a little bit here. And then they offered comfort to the people by tickling their ears and telling them what they want to hear. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to change. Just believe. Just have the confidence, and you'll be saved, and you'll get up, and you'll get to go float around forever on a cloud playing a harp. You'll get to go to heaven. Well, as we're getting ready to get into here, we're going to talk about the resurrections here. And in a word, as they show that these religions, they offered comfort to the people. But they don't offer anything concrete. There's nothing substantial there. They have them deceived. They're deceived into thinking they have something that they don't. But on page 215 is where we left off, is where we're starting this evening. And it shows here on page 215, in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, it's talking about two resurrections. It says two resurrections. 1 Thessalonians 4:16, Shalom speaks of the resurrection of the dead in Messiah. Only the righteous are dead. Only the righteous dead are the dead in Messiah. And then we see here in 1 Yachanan 3:6, and it shows whoever abides in him. I got to read this out of the book of Yahweh. 1 Yachanan 3:6, whoever abides in him does not sin. And whoever sins has not seen him, neither knows him. We can't know Yahweh and continue to practice sin. Well, the world doesn't know what sin is, so what is sin? 1 Yachanan 3:4 says, whosoever commits sin transgresses also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. So whoever abides in him doesn't break the law of Yahweh. And then in 1 Yachanan chapter 2, verses 4 through 5, says, he who says, I know him, but doesn't keep his law is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his law in him truly is the love of Yahweh perfected. By this we know that we are in him. The laws of Yahweh they define what love is, because they don't bring harm to yourself, anyone else, or the environment. They don't bring harm to anybody, and it's only by living by these laws as the world, as pushing them aside now, they're convinced they don't have to live by them. They're convinced that they're too restrictive, but look at what they've gained. Look at what they've got right now. There is nothing more restrictive, no more confining than being stuck in being stuck in a hospital bed, where you can't move, you can't function, because you're so sick, because you're so ill from playing around, from practicing sin. There's nothing more restrictive than dying and being placed into the grave because of the practice of sin. The dead know nothing. The dead can't do anything. There is nothing more restrictive than that. There's nothing restrictive about Yahweh's laws. Yahweh's laws give us freedom. They give us freedom to live. They give us the freedom to live healthy lives, free of war, sickness, disease, all of these things. This is the freedom that comes from the keeping of Yahweh's law. And this, man, is what we are qualifying to teach the nations. The nations are going to have to be, they're going to have to be taught these things. They're going to have to be forced to keep these things so they can actually get it into their head that, hey, these things are beneficial. But only the righteous dead in Messiah. Now think about this one here. Yeketske 18 here shows us, Yeketske 18:4. Behold, all souls are mine. Just as the soul of the Father, also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sins, it will die. What was the first lie? What was the big lie taught by Satan to Eve in the Garden of Eden? You're surely not going to die practicing these things. You're going to live forever. You'll have an immortal soul. And this is what the religions of the world teach, right? If that's true, if there is truly an immortal soul, and when you die, you go up to heaven, where you're issued your harp in a cloud, and there you float around for all eternity, what in the world is the purpose of the resurrection? Why? If your soul goes on forever, and you go to heaven, what's the purpose of the resurrection? And they err not knowing the Scriptures, because not only is there one resurrection, there's two. Scripture speaks of two. But see, Yahweh has a plan. It's all in Yahweh's plan, and it's hidden right in front of them. This is why we have a teacher. This is why Yahweh has blessed us with a righteous teacher to show us these things, because if he didn't show us these things, then we would be ignorant, just like the rest of the world. But Yahweh has blessed us with an awesome teacher to show us these things. And then Yahweh had the love for each and every one of us to call us into his house, to take on, to qualify for the job that he wants us to attain, to train for it and to qualify for it. You know, this is why we're here. This isn't a religion that we're doing just because. There's a purpose behind it. Christianity, they don't know what their purpose is. They don't know why they were created. But yet the plan of Yahweh is so clear to us, because Yahweh has said it very, very clear. Now, the ones who keep Yahweh's commandments and have Yahshua's testimony are considered righteous. The righteous ones who die before Yahshua returns are the dead in Messiah. The dead in Messiah are in the first resurrection. Remember, blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Okay? And that's part of that, blessed and holy. Why blessed and holy? Because they're going to reign with Yahshua. They're going to reign with Yahshua, Messiah, for 1,000 years. Because they're going to qualify. They will have qualified for a position, an eternal position, in the kingdom of Yahweh, in the government of Yahweh. The second resurrection is for the rest of the dead, all others who have ever lived, including babies born dead, and those who have never even heard of the Messiah. These others will remain dead until the 1,000-year reign of Yahshua is finished. In Revelation 20, verse 5, it shows there, it said, but the rest of the dead did not live again until that 1,000 years were finished. Okay, and there again, there's a reason. There's a very specific reason of why, of why that takes place. But his coming here, we have already seen the family of Yahweh and the house of Yahweh, which is the pillar and ground of the truth, in 1 Timothy 3:15, and it shows that we are taken to a place of safety. Now, think about what we do. Think about the command that Yahweh gives us. Think about the command that's given to us. Well, first of all, let me show you here. Remember what 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 19 says? It says, nevertheless, the foundation of Yahweh stands sure, having this seal, the seal of Yahweh. Yahweh knows those who are his, because everyone who reverences the name of Yahweh departs from iniquity. We take on that mark. When we practice the laws of Yahweh, we practice these laws. Not only we take on Yahweh's righteous character, that is his mark. We take on the mark of Yahweh. The mark of the beast. Remember the book that we're studying today. Shows us, it's been showing us what the mark of the beast is, and how subtle and crafty Satan is in trying to get, and how successful she has been in getting the entire world to take that mark without realizing it. Now look at Deuteronomy chapter 14, because we have a very important event that's coming up here in a few short weeks. This is one of the three times a year that we are commanded to go to the place that Yahweh has chosen to establish his name. Right? Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles, and the last great day. Okay? 3 times a year we're commanded to come to the place that Yahweh has chosen to establish his name. Why? To meet up with the people we haven't seen in 6 months? To sit around and have a big meal and just catch up on times? Hey, how's it going? How's work been going? To sit around the campfire and party it up? Toss a few beers back. Well, we don't drink beer anymore. Toss a few sodas back. Sit around, play music. Party. Is that why? No, take a look in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 23. It says, we are to eat the second tithe of your grain. And see, Yahweh makes a way for us to come to his feast by setting up a savings plan for us to come to his feast, which is the second tithe, so we're without excuse. Eat the second tithe of your grain, your new wine, your oil, and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks in front of Yahweh your Father in the place he chooses to establish his name. And notice why. Thereby learning to reverence Yahweh your Father always. That's why we come here. This is why we come on the Sabbath days. This is why we come on the feast days. This is why we come to these classes. It's to learn to reverence Yahweh, how to reverence Yahweh. And remember, in reverencing Yahweh and learning to reverence Yahweh, we fall under that shadow of protection, right? We're talking about coming to the protected place. This is how we do that. Look in the book of Yeshub, or Job, chapter 2. There was a day when the servants of the sons of Yahweh came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan, the adversary and accuser, also came among them to present herself. And Yahweh said to Satan, "Where did you come from?" And Satan answered Yahweh and said, "From going back and forth in the earth and from walking up and down in it." And then Yahweh said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him on the earth, a perfect man, blameless and upright, blameless and upright man, one who reverences Yahweh and shuns evil." And he still holds fast to his integrity, and though you incited me, and he says incited me against him, but Yahweh allowed Yeshub to be tested. Though you convinced me to, though I did not withhold the things from him, you from him, but yet you sought to destroy him without a cause. So Satan answered Yahweh and said, "Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life, but reach out your hand and allow me to have his flesh and bones, and then he will curse you to your face." That's what Satan was saying. She was saying, just let me at him. You just allowed me to get at the material things. Let me come at him. Let me come at him with the aches and pains. Let me come at him with boils. Let me come at him with these things, and then he'll curse you. Then Yahweh replied to Satan and said, "Behold, he is in your power, but you must spare his life." Again, showing that whatever we are going through, we're practicing, we are striving to become perfect as Yahweh is perfect, as Yahshua commanded us to become perfect. So we're going to be tested. These tests and trials are going to come upon us to see if we're going to reverence Yahweh or not. And then that actually shows that Yahweh is in complete control, because he says, he is in your power, but you must spare his life. Yeshub had no way of knowing how far that was going to go. Yahweh did. And that's how it is with each and every one of us as we're going through these tests and trials and these temptations, that we got to remember, men, that we're qualifying. We're trying to qualify for this position, this kingdom. And it's the greatest. It's the greatest job, as Pastor has said. It's the greatest job that will ever be offered to anybody. And with that on the line, yes, we are going to be tested severely. But continuing on here, with Yeshua's coming here, and we took here on the top of page 216, in Matthew 24, 29 to 30, we're shown here, "Immediately, but after the great tribulation of those days, shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken." So, this is talking about these great nuclear wars, this nuclear war that's going to kill 4/5 of the earth's population. And it's going to devastate the earth. And if Yahweh didn't step in at that point, then all life would be completely wiped out. And it's going to get to that point before mankind is actually going to listen. So immediately, but after the great tribulation, when all of these things take place, then shall be the sign of the coming of the Son of Man in the heavens. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. I'm not going to get into it just yet, because we'll get into it here in just a few minutes. But it's just like it was with Cain. Abel told Cain, "Well, why are you angry? Why are you downcast? If you do not do righteousness, will you not be acceptable?" The kingdoms of the earth, they are not going to like it when Yahshua returns. They are not going to like it at all. In fact, there will be a war. There will be a final war where mankind attempts to take out the kingdom of priests, and attempts to take out Yahweh Shema. But that's not going to be allowed to take place. They are going to fail miserably again. But the word immediately in Matthew 24:29 is word number 2112 in Strong's Greek Dictionary, and means directly. It means directly. It means as soon as. In effect, Matthew 24:29 says, as soon as the tribulation is finished, then Yahshua will return. And this is part of the prophecies, again, that we're waiting for, this nuclear war, to the accumulation of this nuclear war to take place, where the sun is darkened and the moon doesn't give her light. This is, and we've been shown how this can take place in the time span of an hour or less. It can take place very, very quickly. Now, continuing on here, it asks the question, Pastor poses the question, why are the righteous taken up into the clouds when Yahshua appears? The world doesn't have any idea. They're already up there. When they die, they go up. They don't have a clue. But in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1, it shows here, now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Savior, Yahshua Messiah, and by the gathering together unto him. And then 1 Thessalonians 4:17, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet Yahshua in the air, and so shall ever be with him. Here in... Pastor has clarified this through the years. He has clarified this through the years, and we're going to be making some references to several of the books of Yahweh, or several of the books of Yisrael. Because there are, Pastor, he goes and he clarifies. If you look up, if you simply look up Yahweh Shema, I think there were like 24 or 25 pages of results that come up that show some of these things here. And if you were to look up some of the other things that tie in with this, the first resurrection, you take a look at some of those other things, you could spend an awful lot of time going through the books of Yisrael, just piecing together all of what Pastor has taught us over the years over these things. But here in the first book of Yisrael, chapter 27 and verse 38 here, it shows here, technology is great when it doesn't run away with you. All right, it shows here, it says in verse 38 here, it says, if you remember all the sermons that go with this here, you'll know this righteous work that Yahweh has set for you. First off, it entails raising the dead and bringing them back to life, taking a team and going to Yahweh Shema, where we will be issued offices or departments that we will work in eternally. Okay, this is part of the reason that we are taken into the clouds. We're taken up, but before we're actually taken up, there's something else that takes place. This pastor shows here, he says, the scripture does not say that we're going to heaven. Yahshua does not come to take us to heaven either. Yahshua descends from heaven. He meets us he meets the house of Yahweh in the clouds. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 17, he says, for Yahshua himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the Malach Gadol, and with the trumpet of Yahweh, and the dead in Messiah shall rise first. So this is speaking of that resurrection. And this is part of what Pastor is talking about right here. First off, it entails raising the dead. And then we, which are alive and remain, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet Yahshua. So those who have died before us, we're not going to get that reward and go up to the clouds first. It's going to be, we're going to have a job to do to raise the dead. The dead in Messiah are going to be raised, and everybody is going to be caught up as one family and taken into the clouds to meet Yahshua, and so shall we ever be with him. In the first book of Yisrael, chapter 25, verse 36, let me see. It shows here, it says, for Yahshua himself will descend. Now, Yahshua is not coming clear to the earth. Okay, so Yahshua is not going to come down and set foot on the earth at that time. He says he's not coming clear to the earth, but he is descending with the clouds. So is Yahweh Shema. If you can realize what it's saying here, Yahweh Shema is descending too, and it will descend through the clouds at that time. It will not touch the earth. It will not, it will not join the earth at that time, and it will not until the earth is cleaned up from the prions and all the other filth that we have accumulated here. And neither will Yahshua. Yahshua isn't going to set foot on the earth either until the earth has been cleansed. Okay, so, let me see here. I think we're still going here. Okay, the 6th book of Yisrayl, again, chapter 25. Let's see how far. I don't know how much of this we want to go through. Pastor here in verse 15 is showing us here. It says, he says, "Now this will clue you in, if you know the scriptures, of what he says about death and about death and the resurrection." And the next few lessons that we will cover by the early prophets, we'll see this spoken of, and then be able to tie it in with certain events. So, again, this book of Yisrael covers many of these things here. But look in verse 20. And he shows here, he says, Yahshua himself will descend from heaven with, now I've brought this out in detail in other sermons, but it's actually given a command. This is actually given a command by this house of Yahweh group in the last days as to when we can say, yes, we are ready for Yahshua to come on. That will be given, and it will be prophesied. It will be prophesied. In fact, in fact, if we don't prophesy it, it won't take place. Yahweh shows that. That's the reason prophecy is so important. It's got to be prophesied first. Each thing, before the command in heaven is given, what is bound on here on earth, if you remember that scripture, it also goes with it. What you bind here on earth, how do you bind it? With words. Remember, all things are established with words. And of course, his chosen house in these last days will do this. This is what he is speaking of here. And the apostle was speaking of when he said, Yahshua won't come without a command to do so. But he will come under that command. When we say it's time, when we say that we're ready for you to come on, then he will come. For Yahshua himself, there verse 22 shows, he will descend from heaven with the shout, with this command, to the voice of the Malach Gadol, or high-ranking Malach, with the trumpet of Yahweh, and the dead in Messiah will rise first. The dead in Messiah. So he shows here that the dead in Messiah are going to rise first. Then look in verse 24. He says, then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together. So that means some of us are going to be alive. Yes, with them in the clouds to meet Yahshua in the air, and will so ever be with him. Verse 18, so in this way comfort one another. Just look at what Yahweh is showing us here. In this way comfort one another. Well, you got to know everything else now that goes with this in order to comfort each other, and we're not going to be weeping over it. We don't have any use. We've got nothing to be sad about. We've got nothing to be downhearted about. We know the outcome of this. We know the outcome of this whole plan of Yahweh that is taking place. Why would we be downcast? We should be rejoicing, rejoicing that we're a part of this plan. If we're downcast, maybe we need to examine ourselves a little bit more and see what it is we may be hiding that we need to get rid of. What is it that we need to overcome? But there's absolutely no reason whatsoever for us to be downcast. Pastor shows here on 2:16 here, he says, we will not be taken into the clouds to strum on a harp. We're taken into the clouds for a purpose. Look in Revelations chapter 6, verse 14 through 17. And the heavens departed as a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their place. And the kings of the earth and the great men and the rich men and the chief captains and the mighty men and every bondman and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. Now, this doesn't mean they go crawled up into the mountains somewhere. They go crawled into foxes' dens somewhere and hid in the earth. Remember what this is talking about. And he said to the rocks and to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne and from this judgment of the Lamb. Remember what this is speaking of, what they're doing. And pastors brought this out, saying to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us. They're running to the religious leaders. They're running to their churches. Remember what Pastor brought out in the Gulf War series about the Tower of Babel. Remember what he brought out about that? Remember the ziggurats that were found in Iran and Iraq, in that area? Remember, they were characterized by a pinnacle on top. And that pinnacle, remember, Pastor showed it was like a church steeple, a pyramid type of thing coming down. Look at the corner of every church, and what do you see? You see this big old tall pinnacle. It's got Tammuz sign on the top of it, but it's got this pinnacle that comes down. And the purpose of that was that when this judgment comes, that the people could go run and hide in there and hopefully have and I'll use their words, the wrath of God diverted away from them. Kind of like a roof does with a rainstorm. When you have a roof that's like that, rain gets dumped on it, what does it do? It flows to the side. Well, this was kind of the same idea that they have together here with these, with this pinnacle, to hopefully divert the judgment and their punishment. It's not their punishment, but it's the consequences of their actions. To divert that away from them so they can be saved. And this is what this is speaking of here. They're going to go run. They're going to go run to these things. They're going to run to their politicians, their religious leaders. They're going to run to the military. They're going to run to all these things, say, help us and hide us. And that's, and of course, that's, they're going to, the consequences of their actions are coming. The prophecies are sure. The word of Yahweh goes forth, and it will not return to him void. It's going to accomplish everything that he sets out. And this is what Pastor was talking about when he said, you better believe the prophecies. You better believe what's taking place. You better believe it. Because remember, he said the fearful and the unbelieving will have their part in the lake of fire. I don't know if anybody else caught it, but you could have heard a pin drop in this place, in this sanctuary when he said that. But that is the case. The fearful and the unbelieving will have their part in the lake of fire. But in these verses here, John the Revelator saw Yahshua's coming from heaven in a vision. John saw that all the tribes of the earth would know that they are in trouble because of their unrighteousness. Yahweh's judgment and Yahshua's judgment was about to come upon them. And again, it's not wrath. It's not wrath like King James shows here. It's not it's not what they try to portray. They try to portray a mean old God, and it has nothing to do with that, but it's the judgment. Remember the laws. Remember the judgments are set, and the laws of Yahweh judgments are set. Blessings will come if you obey these laws. The curses or consequences will come if you break these laws. And the world is experiencing the curses from breaking the law. They're experiencing the consequences that come from that. The sickness, disease, the war, all of those things. At the same time, Yahweh's and Yahshua's judgment is being poured out on the earth. Notice what else is taking place. In Revelation 19, verse 7 through 9, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. The bride of Yahshua, the house of Yahweh, to be the helpmate to Yahshua. This is, has made herself ready. How? By practicing the laws of Yahweh, by taking on Yahweh's perfect righteous character, by preparing for the job, by studying the laws of the kingdom so that they can be applied properly. To learn them and to learn how to apply them. And verse 8 says, and to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. Look at your talits. Remember the fine linen, the linen talits. That fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And remember what the talit represents. Being covered by the laws of Yahweh. And then the tzitzits, what do the tzitzits represent? The 613 laws of Yahweh when they're tied correctly. as a reminder. Because, when we uphold, when we have them, we uphold our hands. We're upholding the laws. And when we're upholding, upholding the laws, that's what it represents. And when we bow our heads and we're praying and we're looking, what are we looking at the bottom? The reminder, the constant reminder of the laws, of what this whole thing represents. I mean, it's really awesome when you think about the reminders that have been placed before us. But he said to me, "Right, blessed are they which are called into the marriage supper of the Lamb." And it says to me, these are the true sayings of Yahweh. Absolutely. Why wouldn't, yes, blessed are they which are called into the marriage supper of the Lamb. Blessed are those who are told, "Well done, my faithful servant, enter into the joy of your rule." There is no way you're going to be able to wipe the smile off anybody's face once those words are told to them. I can guarantee it. Okay. In Revelation 19:9, when it says here, it says, "Called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb," should have said, "called up into the clouds unto the marriage supper of the Lamb." Now, the marriage supper takes place on the sea of glass that is let down from Yahweh out of heaven, okay? And this is Revelation 21:9 through 10. And it says, "And there came to me one of the seven Malachim, which had the seven vials full of the plague, saying, talked with me, saying, Come, and I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit, and the great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Yahweh Shammai, descending out of heaven from Yahweh." Now, note here the splendor Pastor shows here. He says, "Note the splendor of this new Jerusalem, Yahweh Shammah, named in fulfillment of the Scripture." And he shows here in Yeketskiah 48:35, it says, and it was let me see, it said it was round about 18,000 measures, and the name of the city, and from that day shall be Yahweh is there, Yahweh Shammah. Now, again, on top of page 218, notice the splendor, Yahweh Shammah, when it comes down into the clouds for all the world to see. Revelation 21:11 through 21. I'll show you here. I've got a little bit more than just 11 and 21 there. But it says, in verse 2 it says, "And I, Yochanan, saw the holy city, Yahweh Shammah, coming down from Yahweh out of heaven, prepared as the brides adorned for their husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of Yahweh is with men, and he will dwell with them. And the tabernacle of Yahweh is with, and they will be his people, and Yahweh himself will be with them and be their father." Remember, that's that covenant. That's that conditional covenant that we have entered into if we will diligently obey Yahweh's voice by keeping his laws, statutes, commandments, and judgments, and listening to the voice of Yahweh. And the voice of Yahweh is who in these last days? Praise Yahweh, Yisrayl Hawkins. Then we're diligent and obedient to listen to that and to listen to him and to follow his instruction. Then Yahweh promises us, "I will be your father, and you will be my people, a kingdom of priests in a holy nation." This is what is being built with us. See the world, when they go to church, they have no idea. They don't know. They know they're going and do a duty, but they don't know what it is. We have a purpose. We know what our purpose is. We know why we're coming here. We have a goal goals that we are striving to attain. Look here in verse 10. "And he carried me away in the Spirit into a great high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Yahweh Shammah, descending out of heaven from Yahweh, having the glory of Yahweh, and her light was similar to a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal." Look at verse 16. "And the city lies foursquare in the length as large as the breadth, and he measured the city with the reed 12,000 stadia, that is 1,500 miles. Okay? 1,500 miles. The length and the breadth and the height are equal. It's a perfect cube. It's a 1,500 mile wide by 1,500 miles deep by 1,500 miles high. In verse 21 here, And verse 21 shows, and the 12 gates were 12 pearls, and each individual gate was of 1 pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, as it were, transparent as glass. Now go back, just think about that. 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles. I'll give you a little bit of a representation to give you an idea of the massiveness of this. And this is a pretty close estimation. There's the United States. There's the United States. Abilene's kind of right here, sort of kind of in the middle. So if Yahweh Shammah was kind of centered over Abilene, you would have one corner, somewhere up over here over the Indiana-Ohio border. Another one over here looks like the pretty close to Idaho and Utah. Another one down over here, kind of over just south of Baja, California. And another one off the Yucatan Peninsula, between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. Now, you got to realize too, that's just the flat ways. It goes this way too. It goes that way too. And to kind of give you an idea, if you've ever looked up at the night sky and you've watched and you've seen some of these satellites and stuff fly over, specifically, I mean, you can watch and you can see every once in a while, you'll see the International Space Station fly over. That is only 200 miles up. Okay? It's only 200 miles up. Okay, Yahweh Shammah is a little bit taller than that. Okay, 200 miles on this scale. Let me see. There's so 200 miles. I'm going to guess is about here. Well, you know what? It's about the distance from here to Dallas. So that's about how high that space station is. But you got to remember now, that Yahweh Shammah is not going to be. It's going to be in the clouds. It's not going to touch the earth, so it's going to go from that point up. And, I mean, that just kind of gives you an idea of just the spectacular idea of what we're looking at. I would have loved to have been able to do a 3D model of it to kind of show how tall it was in reference to everything, but I just, I didn't have the means to do it, so this was about the best I could do. But Yahweh willing, that kind of gives you a little bit more of a perspective of just the overall area of that city, you know, looking up. I mean, we'd look up and all we see is the bottom. That's all we'd see. I don't know if we would ever see. You might be able to see the edges, quite possibly. But that's just kind of an idea, man, of just the size, the overall size of that city. Now note who is, the top of page 218 here, note who is the bride, the Lamb's wife at this marriage supper. Revelation 21:27. And there will by no means enter into it anything that defiles, or anything that works an abomination. Neither a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. So, you know, that's all who is going to be allowed to enter. Revelation 15, 1 through 4 here. It says, and I saw another sign in heaven, and a great and marvelous 7 malachim, having the 7 last plagues, for in them was the judgment of Yahweh brought to its completion. And I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who had prevailed over the beast, and over her likeness, and over her mark, and over the number of her name, standing on the sea of glass, having the harps of Yahweh. And they sing the song of Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, and the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are your works, Father Yahweh Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of Saints. So, you know, you look, it truly is amazing here. The marriage supper is taking place in the holy city, Yahweh Shema, but the city is suspended above the earth, where all those on earth can see it. In the 4th book of Yisrayl, the reverence of Yahweh, number 16, verse 45 here shows, Revelation 19:6, and I heard, as it were, the voice of a great multitude, and the voice of many waters. Yes, you talk about a loud hallelujah Yahweh. When this voice comes out, you think about the feast. When pastor ends services, he ends the feast, and we all shout hallelujah Yahweh. You hear that roar. You hear that with this tiny group here. Can you imagine how it's going to be with the 144,000 priesthood and Yahweh Shema saying the same thing? Yeah, that's going to be pretty spectacular. Saying it, to think of the 144,000 priesthood saying in one single voice, hallelujah Yahweh. We're going to jar this earth at that time. We're going to jar this earth. You're going to be a few miles above the earth at that time on this great Yahweh Shema, on the sea of glass. The world is going to look up and see you and probably even hear you rejoicing. I would imagine they probably will hear the rejoicing. But where do we go? Page 218. Where do we go from the marriage supper? Yeshua ascended, and it shows here, Yeshua ascended from the Mount of Olives almost 2,000 years ago. At the time Yeshua ascended, the Malachim told the men who were watching in Acts chapter 1, verse 11, he says, which also said, you men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into heaven? The same Yeshua which is taken up from you into heaven will also come in like manner, just as you've seen him go into heaven. Now remember, Yeshua isn't going to return to the earth and physically set foot upon the earth until after the millennial reign, because the earth is going to have to be cleansed. He is not going to defile himself. He's not going to allow himself to become defiled. So after the marriage supper, we're going to be given our jobs. We're going to be given the jobs. And remember, those jobs are going to be teaching and guiding those who are left on the earth and directing the cleanup and cleaning up the mess that 6,000 years of mankind's rule has left. And it's going to be a huge, huge, huge task, but that's going to be our job. Our job is going to be teaching and guiding the people and showing them the jobs that they need to do. The same thing Pastor's doing with us here today. So this is what we are going to be doing. On page 220 it says, at the time of the marriage supper, we who are called out at this time to overcome all the ways of this world will be made. We are going to be the priestly king. The kings and priests in Yahweh's kingdom. We're going to be that ruling government, the government authority. We have the kingdom of Yahweh. Remember, the kingdom of Yahweh is that governmental authority. And we will reign with Yeshua for 1,000 years. We will work to reform all those who are left alive of the nations in this earth, teaching them to live by Yahweh's way only. Because remember, because immediately but after the Great Tribulation, remember, Satan and her demons are going to be bound for 1,000 years. That they should not go forth and deceive the nations any longer. And this is when this cleanup, this is when the earth is going to be returned. During that 1,000 years, it's going to be returned to the way that it was when it was created. And this is what we're striving, this is what we are training for. This is our job. This is our job. In Revelation 15:2 it says, and I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and on them those that overcame the beast and that didn't take on they weren't made in the image and likeness of the beast, but they've been transformed. They've been brought to perfection through the keeping of Yahweh's law. In Revelation 5:10 there it says, and it shows here, he said, he made us unto our Father kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. Revelation 20 verse 4. And I saw the thrones, and they that sat upon them, judgment was given to them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahshua and for the word of Yahweh, and that which had not worshipped the beast, neither her idol, nor received her mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. And that is that is that first resurrection. When Yahshua lived on this earth as a flesh and blood man, it was necessary that he be mocked, scourged, and killed for you and me. His dying was necessary. He had to pay the penalty for the sins you and I have committed. But when Yahshua returns to this earth, he will come with great power and with all authority. And all nations are going to be forced to comply. They're going to comply with the laws of Yahweh. And it seems kind of odd that that's what they're going to have to do, but mankind is going to be given, that is what is going to have to take place. In Revelation 19:14, and the armies which were in heaven, let me see here. So it says, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon the white horses, and clothed with fine linen, clean and white. Mark 8:38. Whosoever shall be ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in glory of his Father with the holy Malachim. Then it shows here, when Yahshua returns to the earth, all righteous saints and all of his army of Malachim will be with Yahshua when he comes. But does not take place. That does not take place until after that 1,000-year rule. Okay, it's going to be after that, not before. It's after that we're going to have a job, and that job is going to be to cleanse the earth, to clean it, to put it back into the original state it was when it was created. And then, as we're going to see next time, when the second resurrection takes place, mankind, then all those who have ever lived, and we kind of touched on that, is going to be resurrected, and they're going to have 6,000 years of man's history and 1,000 years of what Yahweh's laws can bring. And then they are going to be tested and judged. They're going to be tested and judged during that 100 years, but during that 100 years, they're not going to have it easy, because Satan and her demons are going to be loosed for that 100 years to attempt to deceive them, to see if they are going to make the same choices that we're making now. Say, we believe without seeing. We haven't seen any of these things. And this is why, blessed are those who have seen, or blessed are those who have believed but yet have not seen. And this is why, this is why we are where we are right now. So with that, men, we'll call it, we'll leave you off here on page 221. We'll pick up there next week.